So really pleased to be able to introduce John Banbrook, who is still the Commodore. Is that right, John?
One more day.
One more day. Still the Commodore of Bowmore Sailing.
Yeah, it's our AGM tomorrow, and I get time off for good behaviour. I hope from tomorrow. So I'll have been in post 3 years. This is what I love about sailing, because we go from talking about the very top end of the sport, world-class sailing, to talking about now my lake in the Cotswolds, which is 85 acres, and hopefully you'll all be interested. This I love this photograph. It was taken from a drone back in the summer, and it does make Bowmore look huge, doesn't it? It's much smaller if you come and see us. But nonetheless, that's us. We're in the Cotswolds. We've been there for 40 years, but we've only been on this lake for the last just over 10 years now. And one of the first things to say is that we were very fortunate 10 years ago. We were leasehold on a previous stretch of water, and my forebearers had a very lucky break in that we were offered the opportunity to move next door to let some developers build some very expensive homes on what was our old lake, and to enable us to have this as freehold. Having it freehold, I mean, they must have thought about that decision for about 3 seconds. Having it freehold has given us some opportunities, okay, some of which I'll talk through as we go. The first thing it did was enabled us to get a commercial mortgage. So we've been able to get a new mortgage to build a new clubhouse. I'll talk about facilities in just a second. But we've had a mortgage at 0.5% above base rate for the last, coming up for 15 years actually. So with interest rates being what they are, we've really benefited from that. The other thing about owning your own lake is that, of course, you've got freedom of access, okay, and that's something else that I'll just come on to talk about. So I'm going to just touch on increasing club membership. Now, I gave this presentation at Cardiff last week, and I gave a figure. I said over the last 5 years, our membership has increased by 80%. That is true if you take the end of September figure to the end of September figure, because that's our membership year. But during the week, I did a bit more analysis on that. And if you take our average membership figures, because we have quite a high churn, if you take our average membership figures, over the last 5 years, our membership has increased by 62%. Okay, that's not all sailing, as I'll talk about, but I am pleased to say that 38% of that is an increase in sailing, which kind of goes against or is better than the trends that we're seeing nationally and in the region. And the other thing is we did take part in the RYA survey. And if your club has not done this, I would absolutely thoroughly recommend it, because the output I've found to be hugely useful. And again, I'll perhaps draw on a little bit of that as I go through some slides. So I've just got a few points. There's nothing I'm about to say is rocket salad on its own. Okay, you'll have heard of a lot of what I'm going to say before, and I think we've been fortunate in that we've managed to bring together a lot of those small points together at the same time with an enthusiastic committee that's enabled us to have some of the success in the last couple of years that we've had. And the other thing I would say is that a lot of the initiatives that we've used have come from attendance at the annual club conferences, and some of the workshops that Tony stepped out of the room, but some of the workshops that Tony, Peter Bone, and I think Leon Ward did in the Cotswold region over the last few years. So again, attendance at these events I think is really important for members of your committees. So the first point, reputation. Bowmore had, and I know there's somebody else there from the Cotswold Water Park region, you can see them. Bowmore had, as I'm sure they will tell you, a reputation for being a hardcore racing club. People came to Bowmore to go racing, and then you went home afterwards. Okay, and that was our reputation for quite a number of years, and certainly when I pitched up there 7 years ago. I'm not sure that is entirely the reputation that clubs need to be successful. And actually, again, just going back to our membership survey, one of the questions was describe the club in one word. We had a 40% response rate from our membership, and I was absolutely delighted to see that the top word that our members describe Bowmore as now is friendly. And that touches on those soft skills that Tony just mentioned. Okay, do you know what the reputation of your club is? Okay, because I would say to you that's a really good starting point to understand, where you are and how you may improve things. We've put an awful lot of work in the last few years to shift Bowmore's reputation to being a friendly and particularly a family-friendly club. Facilities. Again, this is something that has come out in club conferences in the past. We were very fortunate to have a newly built clubhouse, but like many clubs, we literally emptied the bank accounts to get this thing out of the ground. And when we started on the new lake 12 years ago, there was virtually nothing in the accounts. Wind forwards 10 years to when I took over as Commodore, our accounts had built back up, and we were sat on £120,000 of reserves in the bank account. But we hadn't moved the facilities forwards. There was no bar at the club. I'm ex-Air Force. That was never ever going to work for very long. The first thing I did when I took over as Commodore was we started a project and we put a new bar in, which is an absolutely fabulous facility. It doubles as a members' kitchen during the day and a bar in the evening. And I'm not here to promote drinking, but I am here to promote a social life. And if you've got a social life, some people now stay after racing and talk to each other. Well, that's the Brilliant Ideas Club. That's where things get generated and enthusiasm get generated. So, the bar has enabled so much more at the club. We invested this year, and I know some of you will have seen it, we spent £65,000 putting a new patio in. That sounds like an extortionate sum of money. But it's doubled the size of the clubhouse. It's a huge decking area with a glass balustrade round. And what it's given the club, particularly this summer with the weather that we've had, has been absolutely fabulous. People come around the corner and go, wow, how much is it to join here? It's made a huge difference. We changed the tables and chairs. We put some really good big pictures up above the windows. We used to refer to it as the old people's home, which was, the smelly carpet in the corner with those high sit-up chairs that old people often sit in homes. It was known as the old people's home. Okay, we've stripped that out. We still have a nice comfy lounge seating area, but we've made it much nicer. Bowmore is now a nice place just to come and spend time. Okay, and if you think about it, if you've got youth, if you've got wives of, husbands of, okay, who don't sail, then actually having an environment where it's nice to be is a really important thing. Programme. We recognised, I think there's less than 40% of our club take part in racing. Bowmore was a racing club. Okay, what are you doing for the other 60%? And through initiatives that we heard here, Ladies Who Launch, cruising Saturdays, even start racing, all those things, a beach club on a Friday night, all the initiatives that you'll have heard at club conferences before, we threw our weight into. They weren't always successful to start with. Who's heard the phrase, we tried that before, it didn't work? It doesn't always first time, and you do sometimes have to rebadge it, reband it, get some more enthusiastic people and stick with it. And if you do, those initiatives can be very, very successful. Diversity. So we own our own lake. We were approached by fishing clubs. And I know, again, in the Cotswold Water Park area, that was quite, there's quite a number, fishing is a very popular activity. We chose not to go down that path, but we used to run a triathlon once a year, or host a triathlon once a year. And the people that came wanted to know if they could outdoor swim. So we've introduced an outdoor swimming membership, and in 5 years that's gone from 2 or 3 to this year we had 83 members as part of our outdoor swimming club. Now if you sail like I do, outdoor swimming is a compatible activity that goes with your sailing. But in all seriousness, it is something. There are safety issues, you can all think about what those might be. But there's always, we live on a lake, there's always an area of the lake that can be used because there's a wind shadow somewhere when you're inland. Okay, so there's always something that you can do. There's always an area for them to go to. And how many of those swimmers have now contributing more towards the club? Be that sometimes just working parties. Some of them do come and enjoy doing duties. Some of them have pulled through into sailing. This summer, stand-up paddle boards, I don't know if you've had this phenomenon, but stand-up paddle boards have gone from, half a dozen at the lake to many dozen at the lake. We got an instructor in and we introduced stand-up paddleboard yoga. What a lot of fun that is. And again, it was something quite often, and I don't mean to be stereotypical about this, because actually I do the stand-up paddleboard yoga. I'm an RS Aero sailor now, I'm now 50, and I have to work on my core muscles really hard. Okay, but it's something that quite often a lot of the mums and a lot of the wives who don't sail go, I'd like to do that, and it gets them to the club, it gets them involved. Photography. We've got a lovely lake, we've got a lovely area. I suspect all of your clubs have this as well. We invited somebody in to run a photography session. Hugely popular. Loads of people came on it. Loads of people said, oh, how much is it to join here? Charity events. We've had the Lechlade Lions in that did an auction that attracted 300 people in to come and, auction for old bits of furniture. Loads of people joined us as members afterwards. We do work with we do a charity swim with a prospect. Again, it gets people to the club. That accounted for a portion of our swimming membership increase. And the RNLI. We like to support RNLI events, quiz evenings and so on. It actually draws people to the club. The more people you get to the club, if your facilities are right, the more people that choose to join. Youth, I'm not going to go on much longer because I think I'm running out of time, but I'm really pleased to see the RYA's focus on youth. Ian's mention of it, and again it was picked out in Tony's. But I am still amazed that some of the clubs that I go to that marginalise youth. Youth can only race at certain times. They're not included in the racing programme. Staggering. Now our youngsters are involved in our racing programme, and are welcome at the club in pretty much everything that we do, and are now a large part of everything we do at the club. They are tomorrow, when I'm sat in the old people's home in a few years' time, they are going to be running the club for me. Okay, embrace the youth. I know it's an easy message. I could talk to you lots about what we've done on youth, but I really don't have the time. Communication. Almost my last point. One of the things that I did when I took over as Commodore was to introduce a weekly newsletter. I used MailChimp to send it out. I know some of you will know my predecessor, and he won't mind me saying this because I have discussed it with him, but he used to send out a weekly newsletter, and if you'll excuse my language, it was known as the Weekly Bollocking. You might have to edit that bit. But it was, you must not, you should not, it was full of the things that you can't do or shouldn't do, or please, I think please was missed quite often. Okay, there is a way of putting that information across. We do have to get that material across, but also I've seen it as my weekly message to communicate with the membership. And we use lots of photographs. People now contribute with their photographs, particularly after the photography course. Okay, they're pleased to get their photos in there, and I get people contributing, and it's become quite a lengthy piece. It does take time, but it is actually really, really useful to get those messages out. And my final point is, all of this is great, but I think for me, the single most important thing is to have somebody on your committee with enthusiasm and energy, because you have extroverts and introverts in the world. Introverts have their place on committees as the club treasurer. No, I jest. All volunteers on committees are obviously gratefully received. But what you must have on your committee are people who can stand up and do this piece, who can stand up, who can talk to a room of people, who can motivate, who can drive, and who have enthusiasm and energy. Because if you don't have that, I think it's very difficult to take your organisation forwards. That, I think, my slides aren't as good as Ian's, or insofar as they don't, they're not from round the world, but we have Cruising Saturday, a picture from our photography course, which I think you'll see is superb, our swimmers about to take part in an event, racing, of course, because that is what the club is still about. Everything we do is still about increasing sailing, even though we do some of those marginal activities. And there's me sat on an SUP doing some SUP yoga. Interestingly, and I'll finish on this, you'll see the shape, you might just see the shape up in the sky in the background. Bowmore is about half a mile behind Fairford's runway, and once a year we get the Fairford, the Royal International Air Tattoo, which is fabulous because we end up with lots of people at the club, camping, staying over for the weekend. We do run it as an open weekend actually, if anyone's interested in a free air show. The turning circle for the show is right over the lake. And this was great because we had an early morning yoga session and we were led on the boards, and the instructor was saying, you know, just feel the water, put your hands in the water and feel the tingle and the tranquility of the area as the F-16 jets blast over your head. There you go, that's me, and thoroughly recommend the club survey. I'll leave mine on here if anybody wanted to look. I really don't mind you know, anybody looking at our data. So if you want to have a look at what output you get, it's there for people to see. Thank you.